All right, we're talking about overtraining syndrome today. This is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart because I work with a lot of people that are constantly trying to push the envelope with their training and trying to get better. And so this is something that we always have kind of a risk of having, and we're kind of trying to work towards this not happening, just with managing people's training load and just response to how they're doing with training. So what I want to talk about is kind of what it is and signs to look out for. But first, I think that we need to understand that overtraining is basically a decrease in performance, and there is some physiologic, but there's also some psychological signs of what we call maladaptation, meaning that we want to train to make ourselves better, whether we're working on speed or power or getting better at our what we need to do for our sport. We hope that we start to adapt to the training in a good way and that we're making gains with whatever we're doing. Maladaptation is where we're not, where the gains are, almost going in the opposite direction. And that has physiologic, but then also has some psychological sides as well to it. Sometimes when we are working on training programs, we maybe plan in something called overreaching or functional overreaching. This is where maybe we have planned into somebody's training that they are going to have a couple really hard days in a row. Preseason for a lot of sports builds and things like that, where this is hard. The goal is that you are feeling fatigued and you may not be feeling like you're playing at your best, but we're going to give you a couple recovery days soon afterward, and the body should be able to fully recover from that. Sometimes this is a symptom, meaning that like we have a training plan, but then like somebody just continues to be sore and tired and fatigued, and maybe that wasn't necessarily trained. So sometimes it can happen on its own. Sometimes it can be planned. Not necessarily a bad thing if you do something about it. If you give that athlete a recovery period afterward, or if you monitor them and they are recovering. What it can evolve in is to something called extreme overreaching, which is non-functional overreaching. And this is where you are continuing to train very intensely. You're not getting enough at recovery. And then the performance starts to decrease or it's stagnant. So we're not seeing the gains. This can evolve even further into something called overtraining syndrome. And this is where we start to have an issue. And this is where we have decreased performance. We have decreased force production. So your muscles and your body's not able to produce the amount of force needed. And decreased glycolytic capacity, meaning physiologically, we're seeing some changes in how the body can use and store energy. So understanding that OTS or overtraining syndrome is multifactorial. So there's not just one thing that you're going to notice that says like I'm overtraining. There's a lot of things that go into play here. And this is where it's kind of tricky to understand, if somebody is in overtraining or not. Unexplained underperformance, you're just training worse or you're performing worse and you don't know why. You're tired all the time, both mentally and physically, or one of those or both of those. Training feels like it's harder than it normally is. And maybe it's like the same workout that you've done a million times. It just feels a lot harder, a lot more effort. There's sleep disorders, anywhere from people are sleeping too much because their body needs a recovery to people are having very restless nights and having difficulty sleeping. We also see a loss of appetite. We also see kind of mood changes, irritability, changes in mood, increased anxiety, decreased confidence in their performance. There's an increase in respiratory infections, or you're getting sick because the body cannot fight those off. The immune system isn't working as well as it should because of this excessive fatigue that we're seeing. When we see like maximal exercise tests, so if we're, testing somebody's fitness, or something that has to do, relative to their sport or even their vital signs, they tend to be different compared to that person or that athlete's baseline. So, an athlete may have a certain resting heart rate, and we see that spike and stay spiked for a while. Or, they're the 1 rep max testing in the weight room, like they're not hitting the weight that they were hoping to hit, or that they have the capability to hit. There are some things that play into this. Multiple like time zone travel. So professional athletes deal with this all the time, where they are having to travel across multiple time zones to play games and altering their schedule. There's quick turnaround between some of those road trips that can play into this as well. Social factors can also play into this, being pushed, by peers or coaches or whatever it is, or, outside factors, media. And then again, there are some psychological, mood changes that can go with it as well. So understanding kind of again, it's multifactorial, it's tricky, but understanding all of these kind of signs and symptoms. And if you are noticing these, you could be overtraining, and, talking to an expert or figuring out how to readjust your training is going to be really important for this. That's all for this week. I'll see you guys next week.